How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? This is Chris Pagillo, a.k.a. the Italian Bombada, and you are listening to Super Show Sunday.
Hello and welcome to the Ron Talks Tabletop Podcast Super Show Sunday, a podcast within a podcast where I talk about my favorite card game, Super Show the Game. I like to bring guests on to this podcast, and today I have yet another special guest, somebody that's been around a while. So, would you please introduce yourself? Who are you?
How's it going, Ron? Thank you for having me. My name is Chris Pagillo, also known as the Italian Bombada in the Super Show the Game universe, and it is my honor to be on this broadcast finally.
There was a whole lot that I didn't know about you, and then once I discovered that, I decided it was time for me to correct that oversight. Uh,
You know, to say it's only right to finally have your coach on here.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll talk about that. I've certainly mentioned you in previous episodes, but thank you, Chris, for being on the show tonight, and I am looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have, and hopefully for you folks that are listening, whether you are Super Show fans or not, that you're going to really enjoy this. I try to bring
I'm
people that are very
looking forward. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm also looking forward to this. I listen to your podcast every week. Your interviews are very insightful. You get to know people a lot better than how we portray ourselves on the discussion group and stuff like that. So it's an amazing opportunity for me to be here. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. I super appreciate that. So, Chris, to get into this interview, how did you get into hobby gaming in the first place? Believe that Super Show is not your first tabletop game experience?
It is not. When I was younger, I wasn't really that much into card games, but I would always used to hang out with all my friends. I was a big fan of the anime Yu-Gi-Oh! That's when it first came out. So I liked it. Then I found out it was actually based on a real card game. So I looked it up, saw it was there, and I picked it up, started playing it. And then from playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I would go to this store that was near my house called VGC, Video Game Central. And they also had card games there that people would play. And I came across a lot of people playing a wrestling-based card game called Raw Deal. So I started playing that. I was playing both of those for a couple of years up until 2004. Then I moved away to Florida and I couldn't find a play area when I moved down there in '04. And then I stopped playing card games entirely until Super Show came around. And that's what brought me back to card gaming.
All right, interesting. What has your experience been with wrestling and everything like that?
My earliest memories as a child is waking up every Saturday morning, watching Superstars of Wrestling on Saturday on Fox 5 here in New York, WWF at the time. Just enjoying that. Then at 6:05 Eastern, turning on TBS and watching WCW Saturday night. I still remember all that throughout my entire life, pretty much. My earliest memories I remember back when I was a child watching WrestleMania 6 with Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior and me breaking down in tears when the Warrior beat Hogan because I didn't think it was possible. So that's how much memories of wrestling I have going all the way back to that.
Would you say that was an experience that broke your heart?
Oh, that hit me hard. But then it like lit a switch in me because then I went from loving Hulk Hogan to loving the Ultimate Warrior, becoming the biggest Ultimate Warrior fan, and I stopped being a fan of Hogan.
Which I think is what Vince wanted, or at least he wanted you to buy both of the merchandise. But
I had my
definitely,
parents buy me all the merch like crazy because, like I said, I live here in New York, so Madison Square Garden is at the time was like the home base, and they put on a show either every month or every other month. And my parents from 1992 to 1997 or 98, we went to every single show in Madison Square Garden because my father, his boss, owned a skybox in Madison Square Garden. So he would give the tickets to my father for every event. And you just go there and enjoy every show there.
that must have been a really amazing experience.
Nothing was as great of an experience as sitting in that skybox, inside that skybox and watching WrestleMania 10. Oh,
Yeah, that sounds really great. So obviously you've been a wrestling fan for a long time, and
yes.
you played Yu-Gi-Oh. And even though you took a break, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, from hobby gaming, but then this little game called Super Show came into your life, and
Yes, it did.
this is a podcast about that game. So tell me your Super Show story. How did you get into it? What do you love about it? You know, all of that stuff.
Okay. Well, as people know, my day job, I'm an officer at the racetracks here in New York. I was working with a friend of mine called Mike DeVal that some people know as with the nickname Ugly Bob that he used to play Raw Deal with all the time here in New York and traveled all around, played in Worlds, played in a bunch of other events. And I was working with him, and I came into work one day, and he goes to me, he goes, hey, Chris, he goes, you remember Steve? I was like, Steve who? He's like, Russ. I'm like, yeah. He's like, he created a new wrestling game. I'm like, he did? I'm like, yeah. He goes, it's called Super Show. He goes, I have it right here. And he showed me it. And it was just the original, the very first starter set of El Super Hombre versus Snake Pit. I was like,
Okay.
so I'm just looking at the cards. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. He goes, you want to learn to play it? I was like, yeah, let's go. So he sat me down. He gave me a quick demo and we played nonstop every day for about a good 2 weeks. Then it got to a point that I was just playing it so much. I was like, do you have Steve's number? And he's like, yeah. So he gave me Steve's number. I hit him up. I was like, yo, I'm like, hey, have you been? Just catching up with him. I'm like, DeVal brought the game into work. We've been playing it. I absolutely love this. How can I get a copy of it? Just talked to Steve. I met up with him. Turned out that where I was living, we was just not that far away from him. He sold me a copy, and I was just playing it. And then he went to me, he goes, hey, I head out to the store about once a month and I hold events. I'm going out there tomorrow. You want to come with me? I was like, yeah, let's go. So I went there, played in my first event, did absolutely horrible. Did not win a single match, but I was hooked from that point forward, and I have not stopped playing since.
Wow. Now, this was pretty much at the beginning, right? It sounds like
Yeah, this is. Let me see. We're celebrating the 10 year anniversary. This is around 2015.
so it was a very young game at that point. Like
Yes, it was.
probably like a year. So I have to ask, what was the Super Show game like? I've heard some things. I wasn't exactly sure about those things, but obviously it's different today because of the 10 years of development and the card pool and everything like that. But what was it like?
Well, back then it was very basic. It was just two different cards in each slot. That's all there was around the time. There was 7 or 8 different competitors. There was Ombre, Snake Pit, EDM, Big Shot, Rising Sun, Gold Standard, Llama, Donation, D2, and Mysterious. When I started playing, like yeah, and then yeah, I think it's just those 10 were the only ones that were in the game when I started playing. It was right at the time of the very first Kickstarter just launched. So it was just a lot of fun. Just got into it, playing it, and it was easy to catch on, easy to figure out, very, very easy to customize. And there was only 2 entrance cards out at the time. Vinny the Voice and Beats by Bilo were the only 2 entrance cards in the game. So everybody was only using one of those two. So it was very nice, very simple. I've been so happy with the growth of the game since then and how much it's gone on. We're getting very close to 800 single competitors released in the game. It'll be over 800 once the Super Lucha set is officially out. So it's great. I'm so happy for the expansion that this company has had and how much this game has taken off. Happy for Steve that everything that he was able to do to accomplish this. It's been a long, hard road, but can't get there without hustling. And Steve's a hustler and he made it work. And I'm so happy for him that he did.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me, like, what are some of your favorite things about Super Show?
How long is this podcast? So I know how much time I have to talk about some of my favorite stuff. But I'll just put it nice and simple. The community is my favorite stuff about Super Show. Because we're more than a community. We're a family. We all look out for each other. We all love each other. We'll fight. We'll argue. But then we get back together. We talk just like every family is. There's some family members you can't stand. There's some family members you can't wait to see. So this is exactly how this community is. And it's just so perfect.
Yeah, that's the truth for sure. If you folks have been listening to this podcast since I've started Super Show Sunday, that is a common answer amongst other things, right? Seriously, the community is fantastic.
That's 100% true. There is nothing like this anywhere. You can play any game and it won't be like this.
So you've been around a while, basically just about as long as this game has been around. But over time, I've learned more and more about you and just how deep your ties and involvement goes with Super Show. So my next question is like, what is your involvement in the Super Show community?
It started back when we were heading out to my first Origin, which was all the way back in 2018. We were all just in a meeting getting ready to go out there. I was at Steve's house. We were actually celebrating his birthday. It was a surprise party thrown for him. I was there hanging out. And then we're just planning everything to go to Origins. It was myself, him, and his cousin Nick. They're just talking about wanting to get more of a presence on social media and all. And I heard Steve talking about this. I was like, well, you have a Twitter, correct? And he's like, yeah. I was like, I followed on your Twitter. You don't do anything with it. I'm like, you have very little followers. You don't put out much content. He's like, well, I don't know how to run Twitter. I was like, I'm like, if you look at my page, I haven't really been active on it that much, but I have thousands of followers on Twitter, but it's all based off of hashtagging. So how about you let me help you run the Twitter? He goes, you'd be willing to do that? I'm like, yeah. So he's like, done. And since then, I've been helping running the social media for Super Show the Game on their Twitter, giving them ideas for what to post on other platforms, and just been having a blast with that ever since. Especially with doing that, it helps communicate with other wrestlers, help get the game out, and I just absolutely love it. It helped for me to reach out to a friend of mine, Captain L Shoes, to get him into the game due to me reaching out to him on social media. It's just a great time, and I have a blast doing it all.
Who are some of the wrestlers that you have reached out to that and help get into the game, aside from?
Captain L Shoes, who I've reached out to, due to I have a relationship with him. I grew up with his brother, and then with him getting big with the major podcast, I was like, this would be perfect for me to get him into the game. There's other wrestlers who I've reached out onto social media and I helped get information for Steve, but I wasn't the one that brokered the deal. I would like, hey, here's some information, and they would give their contact details, and I would hand it off to Steve, and he handled all the rest.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, but that's still important.
L Shoes is pretty much main person which I contacted, and I did all the information myself. I got his name, his finishers. I let him pick out his stat line, and got his what he wanted his finishers to look like. So that was the first one that Steve allowed me to go from start to end
Okay.
in creating and all that stuff, and I'm grateful for that.
And you do stuff for SRG and other functions, right?
Yes, I do. I work with SRG at conventions. I work with every year since 2018, except for one. I've worked Origins and I have worked PAX Unplugged, and I've worked various other conventions in between there. I've helped them out at a Steel City Con in Pittsburgh one year, WinterCon here in New York, and a few others here, small conventions here and
And so, like, I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself
there.
about being an employee and everything like that. We talked about your social media duties and everything like that, and contacting indie wrestlers to be a part of that process of bringing them into the game, of which Super Show has several, including some names that you may know: AJ Styles, Ricochet, Zack Sabre Jr., Kenny Omega, like
Young
the list.
Bucks.
Yeah.
And I just want to say one thing. There's actually one person who is responsible for all this. And that was the first indie person that SRG really signed that helped get the name out. And that would be Colt Cabana. He was one of the very, very first ones. And he featured SRG on his podcast back then when podcasts were just starting out that nobody really knew what they were. He got the word out and he would advertise SRG and he had his cards with him. And him having his cards at a Ring of Honor show is what got the Young Bucks like, hey, what's this? How do I get in this? And that led to Kenny Omega, and that led to a whole bunch of others. So Super Show owes a lot of its success and its backing with the indie community thanks to Colt Cabana.
That's great.
I can remember back in 2018 at PAX Unplugged. That was our first time ever working PAX Unplugged. And we're just there, and walking by the table was Tyler Breeze, Mace Madden, now wrestles in AEW, became Masai and Mace in WWE, part of the MXM collection. Ember Moons, who's now Athena, and Austin, Xavier Woods, were just walking by. And El Gato Sombrero was working with us, and he pulled Tyler in, asked him to do a demo. They were recording stuff for Up, Up, Down, Down. Got him to down, and he fell in love with Super Show. That he came back the very next day on his own just to find us, just to pick up product. And that's what got the ball running for us to get him into the game while he was still under contract with WWE.
Oh, wow. There was a possibility that Xavier Woods could have been in the game.
Yeah, there was a very, very strong possibility. There was conversations that went back and forth. There was even, I'll pull back the wall and I'll give out some information. If Steve's listening to this, I'm sorry, Steve. There was an Austin Creed competitor created with art and a gimmick and all. And it just, the lines of communication ended. We don't know exactly why. And he never got released. Very, very sad. He was a good competitor. It was a lot of fun.
It's not the same situation, but while Chris Jericho is not in the game officially, there is a guy that looks a whole lot like him.
The guy who looks a whole lot like him was created by Chris Jericho.
That's right.
That all happened due to the very, very first cruise is Jericho, and Super Show the Game was one of the major sponsors for that cruise.
And when was that?
6 years ago.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to what I just said just before. I have the Austin Creed original gimmick on my phone with the art and all. His gimmick was going to be when you roll grapple, you may draw two cards, then bury two cards in your hand. and
Oh
his
wow.
grapple was an 8.
That's a good gimmick. But don't want to get too deep in the weeds about game mechanics here. I know a lot of us Super Show folks listen to the podcast, but I know non-Super Show playing people listen to the podcast as well. So Chris, you are a longtime SRG employee, volunteering at conventions and whatnot. Is there anything else to that? Because I think I know that you do some work in a warehouse or like what other stuff that you do for.
When I used to live closer to Steve when he lived in Howard Beach and I lived in Ozone Park, that those towns are right next to each other, and I was about a 20-minute walk from where I lived to where Steve used to live. So I used to head over to the old Grand Machine Studios quite frequently. And I still remember the first time I walked over there, I went downstairs into the basement and I looked around. I was like, how do you know what's what? Everything was all over the place, completely unorganized. And he had this one huge box. It was insane. That was just filled to its complete brim with a bunch of cards, in which Steve did not know what was in those boxes. So one time I was like, Steve, can I please take this box, bring it home, and organize it for you? So you know exactly what you have. He's like, all right. He gave me the box. I brought it home. And I bought little ties to put around each stack. So when I was organizing them, so I know what was what, just for me to be cleaning out entire box to find about 20 sets of Amazing Red in there, sets of Ricochet. I found 4 sets of AJ Styles in this random box just all over the place. All the cards were loose. I organized them all together. And I'm just going through just the amount of stuff. I was like, do you realize all the things you had in here? He's like, not at all. When that was all done, I came back and I saw how he had all the competitors all over the place. I was like, do you mind if you leave out of this basement real quick? Give me an hour, come back down and let me organize this entire thing for you. Because I am very OCD with stuff. All my cards, I keep everything in numbered order, alphabetical order. If anything's out of spot, it messes up my head. So I was down there and I was going nuts. So I pulled literally every box of competitors off the shelf, laid them all on the floor, organized every single competitor alphabetical order with the little dividers in between them because they were in loose boxes. So as there wasn't that many at the time, so he knew exactly who was who, just going in order. And I just going to work through everything all over the floor, like in stacks, then organized it all together. And by the time it was done, I was like, all right. He came down and he was like, and he had a few orders on the computer. He's like, this makes it so much easier to gather. Organization matters. So I would go every once in a while whenever he'd get new stuff and help him organize everything down there. Sam, aka Sage the Wicked Witch, she pulled me to the side. She goes, I've been trying to get him to do this. This is going to make this so much easier for all of us to organize it all. I'm like, and then also there was another Kickstarter the one that came out that had one of the box sets was Ariel Lipstick versus Witch Hunter General. We had a conveyor belt system. It was Steve, Sam, myself, Dan Page, John Polverino, and one other person all in the basement constructing box sets to go out for us to sell. That was a day that was insane. The stickiness on our fingers from having to rip back the tape where they had to seal the boxes certain ways. It was crazy.
Sounds crazy. But everybody involved in that, I know all those names and all those people are people near and dear to Steve's heart. I'm sure the community is thankful for you doing that.
It's a mom and pop operation, and people have said this before, and Steve will say it all the time. The real backbone of the entire operation was the Grand Machine herself. If it was not for Grand Machine, Steve wouldn't been able to do what he did because he kept everything in her basement. That's why it's called Grand Machine Studios. It was in her house where everything was kept, everything was stored, all the orders were done. When Steve was out working after school programs to get the word out for the Super Show, doing all these other things, Grand Machine was back home packing up orders for people. She was packing up competitor sets all day, all night. So Grand Machine is the real backbone of everything for SRG. You're also talking about like other things I do for SRG back then. Back then, SRG Universe had a sponsorship with House of Glory Wrestling here in New York. And every House of Glory show, SRG had a merch table in which to sell the game. I was the one that was in charge of doing that. I would set up the table and I would sell the game at the wrestling shows every 2 months or every month whenever they had an event. It was myself and Sam were the two main people. We'll go into all these shows. Steve would be busy doing other stuff. So she'd pick me up. You go set up the table before the wrestling show event started, be there throughout the whole thing, break it down at the end. And that's how we actually made a lot of connections with other wrestlers who were coming in to participate at House of Glory. And them seeing the game, we brought them over. That's how Flip Gordon got into the game. He came for a House of Glory show We brought him over, we showed him the game, and that's what hooked him. And he's like, all right, I want in.
Cool, cool. Flip Gordon's one of my favorites. So that's cool. So you've done a lot. You have a lot of stories. You're still doing a lot to this day. I am grateful for that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about gameplay experience and what have you, accomplishments and things. What are your accomplishments in the game?
Well, my accomplishments in the game so far, not many, just a very few. I'm just only the current LFF Hardcore champion, number one contender for the LFF Old School Championship, Ron.
Yeah, I'm the old school champion, folks, if you didn't know.
But I am also a former LFF Tri-State Tag Team Champion, former LFF Tag Team Champion, former LFF Trios Champion, current LFF General Manager of the Trios Division,
Thank you very
former
much.
former LFF Underworld Champion, and former LFF World Champion. Just a few accolades, not many.
Just a few.
Also a former CAC tournament winner. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the CAC bit. I didn't know that you were a CAC winner.
Yes, I was the second ever CAC.
Okay.
The very first CAC tournament ever won was called Plaid Saturday. That was won by Kirk Polka. And the second CAC was the very first Rumble at the Rumble, which was won by yours truly.
See, this is why I brought you on to learn all this history, and so and to let people know about this history as well. That's pretty cool stuff. Folks, I've talked about this before. If you've played other card games, you have those tournaments that are like, big prize cash tournaments, like Magic might have $1,000 tournament or higher, because Magic's still it's the big dog, right? But other card games, they also have these cash tournaments. Well, the most competitive field that you're going to experience in Super Show is a CAC. It a create a character tournament. The winner gets to create a character in the game, which currently has a value of $900. It's a big deal, cash wise, it's a big deal, prestige wise. To win one of those, you have to go through a lot, and it really brings out the best in people that attend those things. Carry on.
Do you mind if I go into a story
Go for it.
that I've shared this to many people, but your listeners, the podcast might not know about the story behind my win at Rumble at the Rumble. It all goes that the tournament was going to happen. I had my deck set up. I was going to use myself, the Italian Bombada, in the tournament. At the same time that this was all going on, SRG had their CCC, the Creative Competitor Competition, going on. There was this young girl in the competition. Her name Shelby Stevens. I met her at Origins that year. A young girl, very funny, awesome. Well, she was trying to win that competition, going by the moniker of the Witch's Apprentice, trying to be Sage's apprentice. And she was doing hysterical promos. In my eyes, she was the favorite to win. I didn't think see anyone defeating her. But then tragedy struck. Her father, Matt Stevens, who been immortalized in the game, I met him at Origins that year. Awesome dude. He was the person responsible for all of her videos. Tragically lost his life due to a drunk driver. It happened just a few weeks before the Rumble at the Rumble. It hurt everybody in the communities. Everybody who got to meet him knew he was an amazing guy, great energy, awesome personality, infectious smile, and his family was great. But once that happened, sorry, I'm getting choked up talking about this. Shelby lost all her energy to compete in the competition, and she stopped doing the promos. And due to that, people stopped voting for her, and she got eliminated from the competition because she just couldn't continue it on her own. She didn't feel like doing it. So when Matt passed, I reached out to his play group, which was the people in Kentucky, and I went to him. I was like, "Do me a favor. What was his favorite deck to play, and what cards did he always like to play?" Mike Bailey, a.k.a. Anarchy's son, Kirk Polka, Jacob Maynard, and Shane Strickland is who I was talking to. They all told me that he currently was obsessed with this combo of Grim, who no longer can be used in the game. He had a gimmick that you can reveal any other competitor in the game and add their gimmick to yours, but with his style line. So he was using Grim paired up with Candice LeRae. I was like, all right. Well, they said, but his favorite cards in the game, Big Boot and Spear, was his two favorite cards in the game. They said he ran that in every deck, no matter what. So I was like, fine. So I built a Grim Candace deck the day before the CAC, and I made sure I put Boot and I made sure I put Spear in the deck. And there was one other card. They said he played Schoolboy in every single deck, no matter what the stat line was. So I had to have all three cards in the deck. So I started with that base, built the deck, and I was okay, happy with the deck. And I'm just going into the event. I just made the top cut with the very last spot. I'm battling, and I won my. And we only cut to a top four, so we didn't have that big of a turnout. I'll admit that. Cut to a top four. I won my semifinal match. I went to the finals, in which I had to play John Polverino using his Immortal Warrior deck, in which he destroyed everybody with at Gen Con just earlier that year. And earlier that year, I won Origins with the Italian Bombada. So I was like, oh, so it's the Origins and the Gen Con champions facing off with each other in this tournament. We sit down, we play. We made the finals best 2 out of 3 falls. In New York, that's how we always used to play all of our events. They were always 2 out of 3 falls. So we called that for that final. And if anybody ever plays a 2 out of 3 falls match against John Polverino, he normally gives you the first fall because he's normally sitting back watching and learning your deck during that entire first fall. So he knows what to look out for in the second and third fall. So our first fall went back and forth for a while. It actually went all the way to around Cremi to 3 or 4. And I luckily got a finish off and I won. And I was like, woof, took my breath. In order for me to hit the finish, I hit Spear followed by a big boot, which helped me get the cards I needed for the finish. So it was just perfect. So it was like Matt helped me with that, is how I felt. And then we went into the second fall. We bumped on the first turn roll. I won the second roll. I had Schoolboy in my hand, played Schoolboy, rolled a 10, so which Schoolboy makes it a 7. And John P's breakout roll was 6, 5, 6. I beat him and I won the CAC. I broke down in tears immediately because all I was thinking was that I used Matt's deck with the card that he absolutely loved and it won the game. So I was like, I took the time. I took about a week to catch my emotions and I made a post stating that I won that from Matt. And the only thing that made this better was if I get to honor Matt by putting his daughter, Shelby, a.k.a. the Witch's Apprentice, into the game. So I did that. I worked with Shane Strickland. Pretty much just it was myself and Shane working a lot on coming up with the gimmick, the finish effects. The only thing that I made sure that I went in the effects, I went on like, I want to do a finish that goes off a Schoolboy to honor Matt and honor the win. So that's what made the original strike finish for Witch's Apprentice. And I named it Spell 656 off of John Polverino's finish roll, breakout roll for that match. And with the text, if the crowd meter is high, I think it's 2 or greater, and Schoolboy is in your discard pile, the card could not be stopped. Just to throw back to the Schoolboy and the 656, just how great of a feeling it was. So that's the whole story between the CAC and Witch's Apprentice, which a lot of people do not like now. Because back then, when she came out, she only had 4 triggers. Now she has a lot.
Yes, and I previously had the person that became world champion with said Witch's Apprentice, Brian Schmidt. So yeah, she's pretty good. Okay, so you told me about the story with the Witch's Apprentice, and I know that you've created more competitors in the game. Why don't you tell me about a couple of them?
Yeah, well, I've created about 8 competitors or 9 competitors in this game currently. The first one I created was myself, the Italian Bombada. Then I made the Witch's Apprentice. My next creation I made after that was to honor another person in this community. I met this individual at Origins in 2019, and when we had a 24/7 title that got created by Matt Nealon and Funtime Bob. We were just going around. I met Marcel at the convention. Amazing kid, always had a great demeanor, smiling, but he's nonverbal autistic. So he'd just be sitting there and he would just be watching. So myself and Shady Jeff, who was also at that convention, came up with the idea to make Marcel the final 24/7 champion at the convention. So we went around, we did that, and then I came into a competitor, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to honor Marcel, and I created the Mighty Marcel in honor of him, and I put him in the game. And then that happened. Shortly after that, COVID struck the world, and unfortunately, I lost my mother to COVID. I was battling it myself. I was in the hospital. They wanted to put me on a respirator. I was so out of it. My body was hurting. And in order for me to keep my mind straight, Steve hit me up and he was like, "Hey, get your head into the game. I want you to create me a competitor right now. Give me the stats, give me a gimmick, give me finishers, do all that right now." I was like, "How I'm feeling?" He goes, "No." He goes, "I don't care about how you're feeling." He goes, "This will keep your head up. This will get you motivated." And sitting there, and I came up with Jacques. So I sent him the info on that. And then, like I said, my mom passed away, and I took that to create her, the Bombada. Then I created an alter ego that I debuted at the very first grand gathering known as Shaggy Shark. He just took off, and then I created him into the game. I then put my father, the angler, Tony Pagillo, and then I created a couple of offshoot competitors of my own, Mr. Match of the Year, Forget About It, and that's about it. And a bunch of tornadoes and a bunch of trios, in which I'm not going
Right.
to go into.
You got several singles competitors, but they all have some sort of a story behind them.
Yes.
And I think that's really cool. That's really cool that that Super Show allows you to be able to do something like that.
The only competitors that I created that really don't have a backstory is Forget About It. Everything else has a backstory. Like I said about Jacques, Italian Bombada off of me working at the racetrack. That's the backstory between him. Every other competitor has a backstory. Mr. Match of the Year, I won the LFF Match of the Year award 4 out of 5.
Something else that you're known for is that you came up with a couple of stipulations, which are actually two of my favorite to play, and that is the dark match and the submission match. Submission match came first. So,
Yes.
where did you get the ideas for these stipulations, and how did you incorporate game mechanics to capture the theme?
The submission match was the first one that came out. We were playing at another store. I was sitting down playing with Steve. I was using Bombada. I don't remember who he was using. And we were just sitting there. He's like, with all the submissions and everything, he goes, "You know, it'd be cool if this game had." I was like, "What?" He's like a submission type match. Like you could only win. I was like, so we're just sitting there and just started brainstorming. I was like, "So how about this? If a person rolls submission, they draw." So we just went back and forth. He goes, "How about shuffle back?" And then it came up with what we came up with. If you roll submission, you draw a card. If you hit a submission, you shuffle a submission back. But it got built to a way to work for a Bombada due to he was the first real submission wrestler in Super Show. Due to submission wrestling is my absolute favorite type of wrestling. I'm not into the hardcore stuff. I'm not into bloody. I'm not into high flying. I love great mat wrestling submission based. Like William Regal is one of my all time favorite wrestlers. Kurt Angle, stuff. Bret Hart, I fell in love with how much of a technical wizard he was. So that's what I based Bombada off of, and so we came up with a submission based off of that. So that's the backstory on how submission. Dark match was 100% my own creation. I built that stipulation for two reasons. One, I absolutely hate spotlights. I absolutely hate spotlights. So I wanted a way to turn them off. And two, I created Dark Match as a match where you cannot ask what's in the person's discard pile, just because I was sick and tired of everyone asking every turn, "What's in your discard pile? What's in your discard pile? What's in your discard pile?" Like, you know what? I'm coming away so they can't ask me anymore. And that's how I came up with Dark Match.
Thank you for being on my podcast tonight, Chris. I really appreciate it. You had a lot of compelling stories, and I learned a lot of things about you and about Super Show that I didn't know previously. So that's a great thing too.
Well, I tried to teach you a lot when I was your coach.
You sure did, and you still do to this day. I have one final question that I ask every guest that comes on my show, and it is not a surprise, especially if you listen to my podcast. So, Chris, what is something interesting about you that people may not know about?
I have been thinking about this question. I knew you were going to ask it, and I still don't know what answer to give. uh, but I would say the most interesting stuff about me is, besides my demeanor, I'm always a happy person. I love to have a good time. I hate to see people not happy, so I always try to go out of my way to make people happy. That's why I do all these crazy things with the Shaggy Shark and the voice and all that stuff. But also something that people may not know. is that all came starting when I was in grade school and all that. I actually was a drama kid. I was in the school plays every year. I had the lead in high school in a production of Dan Yankees, in which I was the devil. I wanted to pursue that, but then stuff happened in real life that just took the energy away from it. But if I could, I would have definitely loved to pursue more acting, and that was always my dream, was to do more of that.
Fortunately, in Super Show, we have these characters and we promote the storylines and everything like that. So maybe that helps you a little bit with that in that department.
It does. I get to live out my acting dream by being a weird guy with a huge horse head on my head,
Yeah.
and or a guy with a high pitched voice dressed as a shark.
Yeah, and both of those are characters that people adore, especially Shaggy Shark. People love
Uh,
Shaggy Shark, except for Simon.
Especially Simon Davenant.
Well, folks, thank you for listening to the Ron Talks Tabletop Podcast Super Show Sunday. And until next time, see you later.